A giant blob of seaweed, twice the width of the country, is headed, it appears at this point, toward Florida, threatening to dump some smelly, rotting piles of seaweed across our beaches. There's been a lot of discussion about this. So the type of seaweed is called Sargassum, and most of it is still hundreds of miles from the United States, but some of it has already reached the coast of Key Largo. Now, there are concerns that it will begin to rot and emit toxic fumes. We've smelled that before, sinking up Florida's beaches. Joining us now is Dr. Quentin White, a professor of marine biology at Jacksonville University. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
So when I talked to you last week, you said, I love Sargassum. Okay, so let's, because I think it's not that there's been any kind of panic about this. I think we've all, if you've lived in Jacksonville for a long time, Jacksonville, and I've lived along the beach for a long time, at some point you're going to experience the seaweed and the smell. And there is concerns with the timing that if this does in fact reach Florida, it will be during our most popular time during the summer. Right. First of all, what is Sargassum and why do you love it? Because it's not bad for everything. In fact, it's fantastic for some sea life.
Yeah, no, Sargassum is a fascinating ecosystem, and it sits out in the middle of the North Atlantic as part of a gyre system. It's an ecosystem that has its own flora and fauna. Sargassum, the brown seaweed or algae, but there's crabs and shrimp and fish and all kinds of things that actually take on the characteristics of the Sargassum to hide. We think it's where sea turtles go to spend their quote missing year from the tiny hatchlings until they reappear as about football size. Yeah. So it's a fascinating ecosystem.
So wonderful, but then when it washes ashore on beaches, it's not quite as fascinating for the people who use the beach and sit out on the beach.
Well, in little doses it's great. In fact, I love it when it happens and you find a little fresh glob of Sargassum because it's fascinating to look at. But when you get this massive amount, and what's happening is, and this has been going on now for a number of years, we've seen a gradual increase in the size and the mass about this time of the year, and it used to come a little bit later. But as we had global warming, the sea's getting a little warmer, and we're getting nutrients, just like we get concerned about the St. Johns River with excess nutrients causing algae blooms, we're seeing the same thing now on an oceanic scale with Sargassum.
So is it dangerous for any reason if this is in the water and we're swimming in the ocean? And does this present any kind of harm to people as they walk on the beach?
In fact, I don't think so. The biggest problem with swimming around it is that because there's so many things in it, it may irritate your skin. And so people may find that a little yucky or even potentially irritating. But in terms of being harmful, not really. It's only when, like anything else, comes ashore, it gets in massive quantities and it starts decomposing, then you're going to get the smell, the odor, and all that kind of stuff, and we'll have to dispose of it in some manner.
Is it hard to do that? Is there an issue associated with getting rid of it? I mean, we look at this on satellite, it's enormous. I mean, twice the size of the country.
Well, when it's come ashore in some places south of here in previous years, they've literally taken front-end loaders and scooped it up and then had to put it in a landfill or something like that. But yeah, it's a stinky mess once it comes in large quantities, just like anything else would.
So typically a lot of times when we hear this and we start hearing about red tide as well, is this associated with that in any way? Nothing?
Not really. They're two somewhat separate phenomena, but they're not really tied tightly together. The same kind of warming nutrient may trigger it, but what's happening in the Sargassum is quite different than the red tide. We typically see that more in the Gulf Coast. And we see Sargassum is more of an East Coast, North Atlantic phenomenon.
So is this definitely going to then be a problem for us this summer? Are we going to see a lot of it? Is it going to be along the East Coast, our beaches in particular, or mostly just along the Gulf?
We don't know. It all depends on the weather pattern. Some years we get virtually none. Other years we'll get a lot. It sort of depends on whether, if we get that prevailing southeasterly wind, you get a Bermuda high setting up, you get winds coming in and pushing it ashore, then yes, we'll get a lot. It may be a bigger problem south of us than it will be here, but we just have to wait and watch the weather patterns. Because right now, I've been sort of saying, well, this may be a lot of hoop about nothing, so we're going to see how it turns out.
And is there something that we are all doing that is making this worse?
Yeah, I'm afraid the same things we say about try to clean up the river, about don't excess fertilizer, don't use too much water, don't blow your leaves into the drain. All the things we see that happen in the St. Johns River, all those nutrients flow out into the ocean. And so now we're seeing an oceanic phenomena that really mirrors what we've seen happen in the St. Johns River locally.
Will we know more in a certain amount of time whether or not it's going to even be an issue for us? You look at your
Yes.
crystal ball. Is it a week? Is it 2 weeks? Is
Oh,
it
no,
longer?
it's
shorter?
probably, we're probably talking months at this stage of the game. It's certainly several weeks. This is probably going to get progressively worse over time because we've watched this develop now for about the last 10, 15 years. And so it's going to probably continue. We're going to probably continue to monitor it and see what happens. But there's really not a whole lot we can do because we've sort of set this whole thing in motion now. And we've got to try to contain the runoff, the things that feed this kind of thing into the ocean.
It's definitely food for thought. Thank you, Dr. White. We appreciate it. And I know that we'll have you back on as we get a little bit closer. And we hope that maybe somehow this skirts our area. Fingers crossed.